I'm delighted to interact with the viewers of Sangam Talks. It's my privilege. And let me share a few things about myself, and then we'll get on the topic. Yeah, so I am a distinguished teaching professor at the State University of New York, and Oswego is on the northern part of New York State. And it's a beautiful site, as you can see. This is my university. And the beauty of this place is that 22% of the whole world's drinking water, 22% is right in my backyard. So, I mean, we are very, very lucky. And I have some affinity perhaps with water because in India, I grew up in the holy city, Haridwar. Another place famous for water, Ganges River. And that's where I grew up. And whatever I have achieved in my career, I attribute to my upbringing in that city. Let me talk a little bit about what I have done, and I have published these 4 books: Science in the Medieval World, Sciences of the Ancient Hindus, A History of Science and World Cultures, and Ancient Hindu Science. If you see it here, you see more than 3 books, and the reason is my book Ancient Hindu Science. It is published from JACO from India. It is published from Morgan and Claypool from America, and from Springer in Switzerland. So it is published in 3 different continents, and that's the reason you see more images there. I'm going to be focusing on ancient Hindu science. Let me share the GDP of India from the beginning of the Christian era. When the Christian era started in year 1, and it is published from a book by Angus Maddison, who is a British economist, Indian GDP was 32% of the whole world's GDP. Means the 1/3 of GDP was Indian. In year 1000, it was 28%. In year 1500, 24%, and so on. And then comes 1820. That's where the British influence started. And by 1913, it became only 7.5%. Sad. In year 2003, only 5.5%. And now it is going up because in 2021, it was 7.2%. And right now, we have just superseded France and United Kingdom. So we are the 5th largest economy right now, and that's a credit to the Indians. Now India, it has 2.4% of the surface area, and we have 16.7% of the world population. So you know that population density in India is high. It is a big asset and a big problem. So depending on whose point of view you are looking at, this is how it is. And it has always been population, was always, very high in India. Now, let me talk in year 2000, American Advancement, AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science. They decided that they should document the top 100 major contributions to science in human history. And 98% came from Europe. Only 2%, means only 2 contributions came from the non-Western world. One was the invention of zero, which was credited to India. And second was the astronomical observation of the Hindus and the Mayas. And there was no mention of China, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. Now, just think about it. Here, we are documenting the top 100 contributions. And Hindu astronomy, by the way, the term Hindu, it is not used by me, so don't get angry with me. It is the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is the largest scientific body in the world. So they have used the term Hindu. Now, I'm pretty sure some of the viewers here, they must have studied astronomy. Were they taught about Hindu astronomy? Perhaps not. And that tells us the education we are imparting to our young generation, it is highly incomplete, because if the Hindu astronomy is good enough to be among the top 100 contributions in human history, why are we not teaching about it in astronomy 100 courses anywhere in the world? So basically, that shows that the education we are sharing, it is highly incomplete. We are teaching things selectively. Now, let me talk a little bit about Said al-Andalusi. I'm talking about the Islamic Spain, almost 1,000 years ago. He was a Muslim. He was a Qadi. In India, we say Qaji, means the person whose job is to implement Sharia laws in civil matters. So all the issues are resolved based on Sharia. He was a very good scientist. And he decided that he is going to compile a history of the global history of science. And that is, by the way, the very first attempt to my knowledge. And that book, which he wrote in Arabic, was Tabaqat al-Umam, Category of Nations. And he decided that he is going to rank nations based on their contribution to science. So let's see where India was in that ranking. Now, this is what he wrote. The first nation to have cultivated science is Hind. This is a powerful nation having a large population and a rich kingdom. Hind is known for the wisdom of its people. Over many centuries, all the kings of the past have recognized the ability of the Hindus in all branches of knowledge. Now, so Said al-Andalusi ranked Hind, which means India in today's term, number 1 in science and technology. Why was he ranking India to be number 1 in science and technology? Because that was the world's knowledge 1,000 years ago. Somehow, in the process of colonization, that knowledge disappeared. Now, let me share from a statement from his book. The Hindus, as known to all nations for many centuries, are the essence of wisdom, the source of fairness and objectivity. They are the peoples of sublime pensiveness, universal apologues, and useful and rare inventions. Why is he talking about useful and rare inventions? What have we done? Obviously, our education is not teaching us that uh, globally. Now, another important thing I just want you to know about the Indian culture or Hindu culture. He's saying that these are the people of universal apologues. Now, let me explain that what it means. Means the morality of the Hindus are global in nature. They do not have rules, one for the Hindu and second for the non-Hindus. All rules are universal in nature. And 1,000 years ago, even the Muslims recognized it and appreciated it. So we will never say that, okay, if you are a Hindu, you can lie a little bit once in a while and you will still go to heaven. We don't say that. We say speak truth, and it doesn't matter whether you are a Hindu or what. You can, achieve moksha and so on. So this universal apologues, that's the beauty of that culture. And I'm going to come to these useful and rare inventions in a minute. Now, to give you an example of universal apologues, we talk about Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The whole world is one family. Not just India is everything. We say Satyamev Jayate. So we are emphasizing on truth. We are saying that Sarve Bhavantu Sukhine. All should be, happy. That's the mindset of the Hindus. That's the mindset of that culture. And no wonder it was a ground where people from all different religions, they could take refuge, whether it was Jewish or people or Muslims or Christians. At one time or the other, they took refuge in India. Now, talking about, because we are going to talk about, science, so let's talk about the useful and rare inventions of the Hindus. Now, the first thing is, what is so special about the Hindus? Why, they have come up with useful and rare inventions? Do they have two brains in place of one, or what? So let's analyze that. And these are the Hindu traditions. For example, questioning is a normal thing in Hindu religion. Or in Hindu traditions. So, for example, Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna. Krishna is not telling Arjuna that, listen, keep your mouth shut. Don't ask me these questions. Otherwise, you'll go to hell. He's answering those questions. That's because that's the tradition. If there is a difference of opinion, we resolve those with Shastrarth. We don't kill each other. So that's now those who are scientists or who have dealt with these issues, they know that once you debate, that's where ideas evolve. So if Shastras is the tradition of a culture, ideas are going to evolve in that process. Now, in a culture where knowledge is, appreciated, gurus, teachers have to be, respected, and that is the case in India. And the most important, there was no conflict between science and religion. Uh, you know, uh, as I have mentioned, Hindu thoughts are open to questioning. It's okay. You can ask any question. No question is forbidden in Hindu traditions. Now, uh, by the way, in Shastrarth, they define rules which are those who are, in management, they know that to conduct a meeting, there are rules. We call it Robert's Rules of Order. So it's Robert's Rules of Order that decides how a meeting should be conducted. Now, with the Hindus, they define these rules thousands of years ago. If you read Charak Sahinta, which is a medical treatise, these rules are defined well. Now, I have talked about, guru, which are, they were given more recognition than the God itself, because they said it has to be the teacher who taught me to recognize God. And by the I'm moving a little bit fast because I have to talk about science too. So now, science and religion. There, science and religion, they were never in conflict in India. So no Galileo was ever imprisoned in India. No Bruno was ever killed in India. On the contrary, the disciplines of astronomy, mathematics, chemistry, physics, and yoga, and fine arts, these were the, tools to achieve salvation. So this salvation is something, when I'm saying salvation, I think a more proper word is moksha. So a person could achieve moksha through astronomy, through mathematics, through chemistry, physics, fine arts, music, and so on. So all these disciplines were bound to flourish in India, and that's what really happened. Now, to give you an idea, Aryabhatta wrote his book in 5th century, Aryabhatiya. In that book, he explained the movements of the earth. His system was heliocentric, and he defined mathematics, astronomy, and so on there. And then he wrote, in that, whosoever knows this book, which talks about astronomy, he will achieve moksha. Means astronomy was a tool to achieve moksha. When Kannada wrote Vaisheshika Sutra, which is a book of, physics, he said, if you can learn it, you can achieve liberation, which means moksha. So all these domains of knowledge were avenues to achieve moksha, and obviously, because of that, science was bound to flourish in Hindu culture. And that's indeed what happened. As a result of that, I have just mentioned a few. Zero that's Indian invention. Now, what is so important about zero, and I'll come to that point in a minute, but when we write 11, we write it as 1 and 1. So the 1 on the left has a different magnitude. It is equal to 10. Now, that invention was a monumental invention in the growth of mathematics and, in turn, the growth of science. Because the European Renaissance that happened when the mathematics of India was introduced in Europe through the Middle East. Trigonometric function sine, heliocentric solar system, Ujjain, by the way, that was the Greenwich of the ancient world. Throughout, if the astronomy books that were written in the Middle East, those books had zero longitude in Ujjain. So that was the prominence of Ujjain in the ancient and medieval world. The concept of atom. Kannada, he defined the concept of atom. And Karl Marx, famous philosopher, basically who started communism, he wrote his doctoral thesis on the history of science, on Lucretius. And he has written in his book that Democritus, the person who we say gave us the concept of, atom, perhaps he got that knowledge from India. So he is speculating that perhaps Democritus went to India, came in contact with the Indian philosophers. That's a knowledge which I'm sure the left wing in India don't want to, for some reason, talk about. The rust-free iron, steel, and I will come to these points a little bit later, and plastic surgery, yoga, these are some of the, contributions of India. And these inventions have made a significant impact on world cultures. A story which we have not shared it, properly to the world. Now, go to this. By the way, why do we call 0, 0? In India, it was called Shunya. Shunya means nothing. When Arabs learned it, the word for nothing is sifr in Arabic. So they called it sifr. That sifr, when the Europeans learned it, became cipher. Then the Italian decided that in place of C, let's spell it with Z. And eventually, the French came up with this word, zero. So that's the history behind zero, a history that shows that, the contributions of different cultures, science by nature is multicultural, and it's not just Western. It's a message that we must share it. It is important for the growth of science. Now, this is a statement where a Syrian philosopher in 7th century is writing that Indians, we should learn about them. And those, who believe that because they speak Greek, that they have reached the limits of science, should know these things, and they would be convinced that there are also others, means Hindus, who know something. So that was, Pope Sylvester, a highest religious authority, for Christianity, he was instrumental in promoting, Hindu numerals and Hindu mathematics in Europe before he became Pope, because his name was Gerbert before he became Pope, and he learned mathematics, Hindu mathematics, from Muslim Spain, and then promoted it, and then became a highest authority in Christianity. So that's how science is. Doesn't matter whether they are Hindu, Muslim, or Christians, you basically accept the very best ideas. Fibonacci. We say Fibonacci is the father of mathematics. And he is writing in his own book that I am traveling to Egypt, Syria, Greece, Sicily, Provence, which is France, to learn Hindu mathematics. Now, the man is traveling in other countries to learn, and then he wrote from there his famous book, and today, when we talk about it, we say he is the father of European mathematics. There, India has a very important role to play, something we don't talk about enough. Forget about the rest of the world. We do not talk about it, even in India. It got to change. We have to at least speak the truth, but we are not at this point. Now, if you have to say 5 top scientists of the Islamic world, the name of Al-Khwarizmi will come. He is among the top, perhaps one, depending on the person, but he'll definitely be among the top 5. To share his impact, he wrote this book, Kitab Al-Jabr wa Al-Muqabla. This Al-Jabr became algebra. So algebra is an Arabic word. Now, let me share something about Al-Khwarizmi. This man became famous because he wrote books on Indian mathematics and Indian astronomy. The very title of his books are Kitab al-Isab al-Hindi. Al-Hindi means the, mathematics of India, or mathematics of the of Hind. Ziz al-Sin Hind, that's the astronomy tables from India. So he became famous by simply documenting the sciences of the ancient Hindus. That's a story which, he's admitting it, but it is not a common knowledge. Now, Al-Kindi, another top 5, scientist of the Islamic world. He wrote a book on pharmacology. About 33% of the plants and drugs that he has written in his book, most scholars believe that they have come from India. So that was the, situation, the impact of Indian or Hindu medicine in the Middle East. He also wrote a book on mathematics and Hindu mathematics, and the title itself, it says that this is the book of Hindu mathematics. Ibn Laban, he wrote another, by the way, these are the top Islamic scientists. He wrote a book, Kitab, Hisab al-Hind. Again, he's saying it in the title that the knowledge is coming from India. By the way, I have to say that all majority of Islamic scientists, they were very honest. When they borrowed some ideas from Hind, they admitted it. Unlike things that happened in Europe. So Islamic scientists, they were very open about it. And he is starting his book that in the name of Allah, the merciful and compassionate. This book is on the principle of Hindu arithmetics. So here is a Muslim basically getting blessing of his God and writing a book on Hindu arithmetic. That shows the multicultural nature of science. Al-Biruni, you know about Mahmud Ghaznavi. He was the first person who tried to invade, attack India. He lost 16 times, but he succeeded the 17th time, and that changed the history of India. Mahmud Ghaznavi, he is sponsored. It was a tradition to sponsor scholars because their job was to write, history, or basically document, the rule of that kingdom. So Al-Biruni was that person. His job was to, document. So he was sponsored by Mahmud Ghaznavi, and look at his books. Kitab al-Hind. This is a very famous book, Al-Biruni's India, which is where he is documenting the science of India, and it's a classic book even today. If you read that book, then you realize, my God, how great we were 1,000 years ago, and why we don't share that knowledge. Why don't we celebrate that? Because if we celebrate it, it is a lot easier to unite the country rather than keep complaining what we don't have. I was talking about GDP. GDP happens because of the excellence in science and technology. And now we are better than France right now. We are better than, the United Kingdom. That's a major celebration. Media should, celebrate that and talk about it so that it can unite the country. But they'll be talking about some silly complaint against somebody, This is, I think, a missed opportunity in India. So Al-Biruni, again, he became famous by writing about India. Now, I'm going to say something why there was a decline of GDP. And please, I'm not trying to, criticize anybody here. I'm just writing the historical fact. This is what Al-Biruni has written in his book. Mahmud Ghaznavi utterly ruined the prosperity of the country and performed their wonderful exploits by which Hindus became like atoms of dust, scattered in all directions, and like a tale of old in the mouth of people. Their scattered remains cherish, of course, the most inveterate aversion toward all Muslims. This is the reason to why Hindu science have retired far away from those parts of the country conquered by us. Means basically saying Hindu science is disappearing and have fled to places which our hands cannot yet reach, to Kashmir, Benares, and other places. So here is a Islamic scientist who was sponsored by a Islamic king is writing. Now, I thought I should share this information, uh, you know, uh, with Indian media simply because it's truth. It's a historical fact. And I wrote and wrote and wrote, and I kept on getting rejection. So I thought, okay, let me try Saudi Arabia. So I contacted a magazine, Aramco World, that is published by the royalty of Saudi Arabia, because they own that Aramco oil company, and it is the magazine of Aramco oil company. And when I asked them, they said, great. And so the article was published, The Islamic Science India Connection. This is an article that is published in Saudi Arabian magazine. It is published in in a slightly modified form in Oxford Encyclopedia of Islamic Science, but in Indian media you can't even touch that topic. That's the unfortunate reality. I do not know how many of you have background in science, but in a right angle triangle, we have sine theta, which is a very popular trigonometric function. It is A divided by C, means perpendicular divided by hypotenuse. In India, it was called Jaya. That's the term Aryabhatta used. When Arabs learned it, they decided to call it Jib or Jab. Now, those who are in the Hindi-speaking belt in India, they know that Jab has a meaning. It means pocket. We today even it's a common word. So they use the word Jab in the Middle East. When Europe learned this, the word for pocket in Latin is sinus, and that became sine. So every time we are saying sine theta, basically we are saying pocket theta. Doesn't make sense, but we have been doing it from the last 300 years because that's the influence of India. And it would be so wonderful if a trigonometric book is sharing this knowledge all over the world. By the way, this information, you pick up any encyclopedia, you pick up a dictionary, this knowledge is there, but you are not many trigonometric book will have this knowledge. Now, this is what Aryabhatta is writing. As a man in a boat going forward sees a stationary object moving backward, just so in Sri Lanka, a man sees the stationary stars moving backward. So basically, he's saying that stars are stationary and Earth is moving. Giving an example which a lay person can understand. And yet, you are not going to find that statement in an astronomy book. Now, maybe somebody has played with the translation of Sanskrit language. Well, let me answer that. Al-Biruni, the person who came with Mahmud Ghaznavi, he criticized Indian for assigning motion to the earth in the 11th century. And yet, we teach that it was Copernicus who first came up with that idea of moving earth. You are not going to find things about Aryabhatta. That's the reality. It got to change. And I think within our lifetime, perhaps it may change. Iron pillar, to give an idea, is rust free, and that's a big invention of the Hindus. What they do is they add phosphorus, and that does the trick. So if you add phosphorus in iron, then it can weather without rusting. And to give you an idea how good Indians were in making iron and making steel, plastic surgery, that's another thing. I mean, it was a big news in India a few years ago. Some politicians, and I don't want to name because I don't want to enter in politics here, they were ridiculed for saying that Indians knew about, or ancient Hindus knew about plastic surgery, and the academia totally failed in its responsibility. They were quiet. The truth is, we knew about plastic surgery during the BC period. Now, some of you may be wondering, plastic came only in the last 100 years. How come we have plastic surgery, 2000 years ago? Well, the term plastic here has come from rhinoplasty. That's a Latin term that means shaping of nose. And I will share with you. So here is a situation where a person on the left has lost his nose. And so they cut the skin of the forehead, and from there, made the artificial nose. This was the technique that was used, in India, to repair nose and to repair earlobes. This is provided to us by Sushruta, and I will not go through that because, time limitation. But Indians became so skillful in repairing nose, ears, and lips that Westerners started believing that people use tilak or bindi because they want to hide, conceal their scars left by plastic surgery. Now, the very first case, of plastic surgery was published, when Tipu Sultan, he caught 5 bullock drivers who were helping the British, and he decided to cut their nose and one hand. And one of the persons, he repaired his nose, and it took 25 days. And when British realized it, they decided to write about it in the newspaper, which published on August 5, 1794 in, these two newspapers. These are, by the way, both Indian newspapers. I wish if I can have a copy of those. So if anybody here from the viewers can get me those articles, I would really appreciate it because I cannot get those in America. Now, in London, in the same year, they published an article on plastic surgery. And by the way, this is the portrait of that person who repaired his nose. And as you can see, this is the repaired nose. It is available on a copper sheet. It is available in the British Museum even today. So in Gentleman's Magazine in 1794, it was published that Indians can repair nose and ear lobes, a knowledge that Europeans did not have. In fact, the very first book on plastic surgery was published in 1816 by J.C. Carpio. He was a surgeon from London, and he wrote this book in 1816. And this is what he's writing: that the Indians, they have this knowledge from time immemorial. He's not saying that this is a new knowledge. He's saying it, Indians have that. In the very first book on plastic surgery, Britishers are writing that in India, this knowledge has been there forever. Another interesting statement from the same writer, that this surgery was done by people who make pots, means it was performed by people of today term, we can use scheduled caste. That knowledge was so common that people, we call it scheduled caste today, they were the one who were performing this surgery. That tells you. And yet these are books published in India, published in Europe, and yet there is a big uproar about it in Indian media, and academia did not play its role to resolve this matter. It's, I think, unfortunate, because how good is academia if it is not solving national and social problems? That's our role. We have to do it. Yoga, again, is a oldest system of personal development, which is universally adopted all over the world. And the most important thing there is the role of mind in the welfare of body. This is what yoga is teaching us. So thinking positive, it is a human necessity, by the way, because that's the only way you are going to be healthy. Complaining all day long, which is becoming an Indian trait these days, that's not good for you. So become, the role of mind in the welfare of body, Hindus realized it thousands of years ago. And that's what, taught in Ayurveda. Chess was invented by the Hindus, and it can be documented very clearly. In fact, I have written an article about it, the providing documents, proving that chess was invented by the Hindus. In fact, the book I talked about, Science in the Medieval World, which was written by Syed al-Andalusi, he has written that chess was, Indian Hindu invention. Carl Jung, he was greatly influenced by Patanjali, and he has written, what India can teach us. His impact on psychology is tremendous, and things that he has written has serious Indian influence. So that's Carl Jung, who studied, Hindu science and Hindu literature. Oppenheimer, we are talking about the father of atom bomb. He was so greatly influenced with Bhagavad Gita, Vedas, and Upanishads that he decided to learn Sanskrit language. How many scientists in India are learning Sanskrit language? He mastered it. And in a letter to his brother, he's saying that I have read Bhagavad Gita twice and it's not enough. That's the impact of Hindu literature on Western scientists. When he was the director of the Manhattan Project, and that was the time when President Roosevelt died. And in his condolence message, he talked about Bhagavad Gita. That's the impact of Bhagavad Gita or Hindu literature for Oppenheimer. Now, I'm pretty sure some of you who have some background in physics, they may be aware Nobel laureate Schrödinger. He is the one who gave the wave picture, means you can represent a particle with a wave. Uh, you know, uh, uh, he got Nobel Prize for that. He was a Nobel laureate. He studied Upanishads, Vedas, Bhagavad Gita in great detail. And he has even written about it in his book, My View of the World. And he's talking about Tattvam Asi, that is you, or a human being who is localized and yet he is pervaded in, everywhere in space. The concept of, that he's admitting that was invented by the Indians. So basically, he's one way saying, because that's his, wave mechanics, that his scientific ideas have their origin in Hindu literature. I would love to see that knowledge, documented in a quantum mechanics books. Uh, Unfortunately, that's not the case. Again, he's talking about Schrödinger, that, ancient wisdom of the Upanishads. Uh, he was very open about it. He was not hiding, which I see a trend in India, where they are scared to talk about their belief system. But these people, they openly talk about it. Emerson. By the way, when we talk about American philosophers, uh, Emerson is perhaps ranked number one. And see what he's writing. He is writing, I think Hindu books are the best gymnastics for the mind. That's what he's writing about. Now, he also read Bhagavad Gita and popularized it. And his personal copy of Bhagavad Gita was in a bad shape because it was used so extensively. And he has written about Katha Upanishads, he has written about Vishnu Purana, he has written about Bhagavad Gita, and so on. And that's a knowledge, we are talking about of the last 200 years, and well documented, yet not very popular. Same thing with Thoreau, the another American, philosopher. He's saying, whenever I have read any part of the Vedas, I have felt that some unearthly and unknown light illuminated me. This was the feeling of a top philosopher in America 200 years ago. Unfortunately, not many people know about it. And by the way, all these things that I'm talking about, with proper citation, they are provided in my book, Ancient Hindu Science. Then he's writing, in the morning, I bathe my intellect, in Bhagavad Gita. So these are the people, who talked about Ganges River, who talked about Bhagavad Gita, and these were the top philosophers of America. They've talked about Brahma, they talked about Indra, Vishnu, and so on. This is a knowledge that is not shared with, people in India as yet, or for that matter, globally. So basically, I'm going to stop it at this point. I want to share with you that science does not belong to one culture or one gender. It belongs to all who want to unfold the mysteries of nature. And multiculturalism is not because of the political agenda. It is because it's the true nature of science. So I would be happy to answer any question that you may have.
You
Yes.
mentioned quite a few well-known figures. I have heard about them, and I've also seen their quotes talking about our texts and our knowledge systems. My question is, these people were so famous, so many of them who have learned from our texts. How come it is not known in other countries? I mean, we know the politics of our country. I'm wondering how it wasn't known in their countries. What happened there? If you could enlighten us about that. Thank you.
Oh, I would be happy to. And it's very easy to explain. You know that we were colonized. It was not a coincidence. We were colonized because not only they dominated us physically, they dominated our thinking also. So massive literature was produced to basically show us that we have no tradition. We have, in fact, the Macaulay famous statement that all Hindu literature or Indian literature will not occupy even one shelf of a library, something like that. That was the mindset. So they basically, created a situation where we did not know about our own, traditions, about our own culture, because then it became a lot easier for them to colonize us. And by the way, it is not my, opinion. It is a well-established fact in the history of science, where that science is Eurocentric, means the books that we are writing favor Europeans. I mean, just pick up any book. You are not going to find, many contributions from Russia or China. Why? Russia is a superpower, so they must be good in something, with such a small population, but you're not going to find that. So it is a very well accepted fact that, science that we share is Eurocentric. And think about it, the Greece that we are talking about is like a tiny island. And yet, when you read history of science book, most great ideas came from Greece. Does it make sense? By the way, I know, because I have studied this, I know that the size of Greece today is equal to the size of Florida. So to say that all the knowledge that we need to know in science has come from Florida, if I say that, people will laugh about that. Yet we have been teaching that for the last 500 years. And nobody is raising any issue on that. And if that's the case, then how come India had 1/3 of the GDP? Because to have that GDP, we have to be good in science and technology. So it's basically, a well accepted fact that, it's a Eurocentric, and, we got to change it, and it will change.
I guess I'm aware of Eurocentrism. I'm a social sciences student myself, and I see only Eurocentrism there, head to toe. Psychology is all Eurocentric, social sciences entirely. And I'm also aware of Macaulay's famous minute. I guess my question was more not about the Indian context, but about all these people who are in the West, so in the US, in other countries. They had such clout and power because of the different areas in which they were so accomplished, whether that's science or philosophy, all these different people's names, you took Schrodinger to Thoreau to everyone. So there must have been their academic circles, and through word of mouth, these people were openly reading our texts, appreciating it. How did it not come to be? I understand the politics was to crush us. And I understand that in India, they made us feel inferior. And they tried to make us feel like we had nothing and there was only European knowledge. But what happened in Europe and in the US? How come it did not? I mean, how did it get completely covered up there
Okay,
too, with so many people from there talking about it?
okay. Now, I'm sure you know that the British monarchy uh, before um, uh, Indian independence is there. It have they changed? Have they changed their policies? Answer is no. They were Eurocentric yesterday, they are Eurocentric today. And if they can control us, they would love to control us today. Now, you are saying it by the, then how come people like Emerson and Schrodinger and, uh, uh, Oppenheimer, why they, learn about it? Let me share by the, it's a, not a very well-known fact, but since you are asking me, so let me drift a little bit. Dara Shikoh, the elder brother of Aurangzeb, he was the one who translated some Upanishads and some Hindu books into, Persian. Those books were translated later on in Latin. And it was those Latin books that came, to people like, Goethe and so on. So the European scholar learned it because of the effort of Dara Shikoh. In fact, he did so much good to, the popularity of Hindu religion because of his translation. So scholars, people like Oppenheimer, people like Schrodinger, these people were interested in Hindu literature or Hindu books, not to achieve moksha. They didn't even care. They were interested in these books because they wanted to become better scientists. So they were looking the validity of their ideas in Hindu literature. In fact, Carl Jung, since you mentioned, psychology, he has openly admitted about that, that he's interested in Hindu literature because he is looking for the validity of his ideas in that literature. Same thing with Schrodinger. So these people were looking for ideas and investigating. In fact, I have lived in Germany. Even today, cities like Heidelberg and so on, these people are studying Hindu literature in great depth even today, and not to basically learn about ancient India, but to come up with some new, better ideas for humanity in the future.
My question is that, you mentioned about Macaulay's effect. I think it is time that what needs to be done to reverse it. Do you have some ideas how to do that?
Oh, I think people are aware of it. For any scientific research, you have to have resources. See, China poured billions of dollars to define their history of science. That was the role of Joseph Needham in Cambridge. That's what he did. And China gave billions of dollars. Saudi Arabia poured billions of dollars to define Islamic sciences. So there are plenty of books on Islamic sciences all over the world. How much money have we spent in India? Not much. You can't even think of spending billions of, forget about billions, even the hundreds of millions of dollars. No. So first thing is, how do you unite scholars if you don't support them? So that is the step number one. You have to allow. Okay, how many places in India today we are teaching a course on ancient Indian science? It's our own heritage. And we don't want to teach that heritage? I think that's a mistake. And when I'm saying mistake, I'm very kind to those people. The proper word that is coming to my mind, perhaps I can't say that. So that's the problem. We have not provided resources, we have not provided guidance, and people are scared because they will be labeled, and now you can say, in my case, I mean, I have sacrificed a lot because I decided to work in this field. But fortunately, I realized I have one life to live, and so I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And fortunately, it paid off eventually. But in the early stages of my career, I suffered a lot. I mean, today, I'm a distinguished teaching professor, which is, we are talking of the top 2 or 3%. That's it, So I have done reasonably well. But when I was starting my career, I had to forget about it because I had to establish myself as an atomic physicist so that I could get a job. So those are the issues. So if we can provide resources, if we can unite scholars, where two scholars can sit together and talk with each other, ideas are going to evolve, knowledge is going to evolve, and we will be teaching different history of science, in the coming years. I have no doubt about it. It's going to happen. The private funding is another issue, I mean, people, they give lots of money to, temples and mosques and so on. I think some should pay little money to scholars too. So the mindset of the culture, the mindset of that society also has to change a little bit. And if that happens, because the documents are there, it's just that we have not investigated those, in modern perspective. That's where the flaw is. And I think it can be changed in maybe just 15, 20 years. That's my feeling, and the interest is there because I have written these books, and the number of emails I get, it is so large from all over the world. People are reading it. They are contacting me. So the interest is there. Resources are not at this stage.
First question, what is the course you would suggest that would be most appropriate? What is the single or the number of courses you would suggest that we must introduce in our universities? Number one, first question. Second question, you generally would know the Indian ecosystem of education. Who would be the most appropriate to address this issue and take it forward? And number three, in the government, whom should one contact in India to push this forward?
You have asked me three questions. One, once we can educate an average Indian about their heritage, rest is easy. So if we have one or two courses, that's enough. Because once the interest is generated, then other courses will follow. So right now, at this stage, one or two courses is good enough, Now, who should be the right person? I do not know. By the way, I've been away from Indian higher education for, about 50 years, or 45 years. So I mean, India has changed a lot in last 45 years. So I do not know, but definitely, Ministry of Education. And I'm pretty sure they are aware of my book because I have seen their website and my book is listed there from the Ministry of Education. So somebody in that ministry is aware of my book, and the issue is, can they push for it? Can they promote it? Can they publicize it? By the way, I thought, and this is a true confession and perhaps my failure, that when I wrote this book, I thought I'm going to get so many interviews from India because I'm talking about Indian heritage and talking about, the very first book, Science in the Medieval World, which is based on this 11th century document, which says India is number one country in the world. Do you know that this book is very reasonably popular around the world and not a single copy in India? There is not one library in India that has a copy of that book, and the book was published 30 years ago. And you go to Berlin or Frankfurt or Paris or London or Sydney or New York or anywhere, you will have a copy of that book, but not in India. This is where we are today in India. It got to change. Because just think about a child being raised in India is hell. And if that child is aware that we were number one, that child will have a desire, okay, if we were number one, we can be number one again. So let me work on it. But we never share that information. So basically, we are missing a tremendous opportunity to unite the country. And it's sad. That's all I would say, We can easily, change the mindset in our country by speaking the truth. Another thing that is commonly criticized in India, is basically pushing Hindu agenda. I don't care whether it's a Christian agenda or Islamic agenda or Hindu agenda. All I care for is it true? There is very little discussion on that is it true or not? And I think we should follow the truth. That's the secret of success for any civilization, for any country. And, that mindset got to change.
Would you think this problem can be addressed by having like-minded people like you meeting at the table to discuss the way forward, and like-minded people around the world to take measures for the way forward and to suggest to the people in power to do something, because now is the ideal time to do it?
Yes. In fact, it's a necessity. We have to, or this knowledge is going to disappear. By the way, I'm deeply involved in another project, and that is digitizing Indian knowledge. The archaeological sites we have in India, nobody has digitized those. Now, that's where, by the way, I received $100,000 from the American government to go and in India to document, and to produce a few documentary films. And I have done that. But that's where I talk about resources. Once the money was gone, I can go to India and make those movies. Because those who have made movies, they know how expensive editing is. It's, it's very expensive to create a quality product that will be appreciated by TV industry. For that, you have to have a good editor, and that costs money. Then somebody like me has to fly to India and stay in hotels. I stay in New Delhi, and I know how much I have to pay every time I visit. New Delhi, in staying in Clary's hotel or in some other hotel. So resources are very important